A lot of financial advice assumes you're building wealth to pass on to your kids. But what if that's not your path? About 25% of Americans are childless by choice or circumstance, and the financial system largely wasn't built for them. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talk with certified financial planner Bri Conn about what the financial landscape actually looks like for childless couples and why it requires a different approach. My guest today is Bri Conn, a certified financial planner and child-free wealth specialist who has made it her mission to help the child-free community build financial lives that actually fit their reality. She serves as customer experience manager at Child Free Trust, where she guides people through the estate planning process and helps them protect their chosen families. She also works directly with clients at Child Free Wealth to build comprehensive financial plans tailored to lives lived outside the traditional nuclear family model. Beyond her work, Bri is the co-host of the Child Free Life by Design podcast, where she explores the intersection of money, estate planning, and intentional living for a community that mainstream financial advice too often overlooks. Her expertise has been featured in Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CNBC, Market Watch, and Fortune. Welcome to the show, Bri.
Thank you for having me here today, Steve. It's so good to be here with you.
It's going to be a great discussion. As I indicated before we hit record, my wife and I are a childless couple, so we're very interested in what you had to say. Uh, and I'll have to be briefing my wife tonight over dinner over what we talked about. But first question I have really, and I read the introduction, you're a certified financial planner, and I'm familiar with that certification. I'm sure a lot of people are. But what is this child-free wealth specialist certification? What is that, and what does it involve?
So, Child Free Wealth Specialist is what we have really called anybody who is trained in focusing on child-free people. And so, we're working on one day making it be a designation that we can teach others. We would love to do that. Right now, it's really within our team of can you accurately and kindly help people who don't have kids or are not planning on having kids?
Mhm.
Because there's a different process that you need to have and different ways you need to go about talking about things when you're talking to somebody who doesn't have that part of the picture in their lives and won't have that part of the picture in their lives.
Mhm. So this is a sort of a certification that you do within your organization, and you're hoping it catches on, and you can certify
Yes.
other people in this. You've created this certification program.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, well that's cool. So yeah, with there's all this talk these days of um, a dropping birth rate in this
Mhm. Yeah.
country and really around the world. So I think that the whole childless couple thing, especially among millennials and even Gen Z, could be a really growing niche, and demand I would think would be increasing as the years go for this type of planning. So most financial planning advice, traditionally assumes that children are in the picture.
Mhm.
You're saving for college, you're building generational wealth, you're leaving a legacy. But what does the financial landscape actually look like for childless couples, and why does it require a different approach?
The first question that I ask all of clients that I meet with is, do you care about how much money you leave behind when you die? And many of them say, no, I don't. And if you have a different end goal there, you're not looking to leave behind generational wealth to the next person. The way you think about your plan needs to change
Hmm.
because it might mean that you are working longer and saving more money than you will ever use or need in your life.
Hmm.
And we have so many people come to us and go, man, I really wish that I would have taken and I want to go quit my job and do this or try this instead, or I just can't do these things because I don't make enough money.
Hmm.
And I'll look at their financial picture and I'll go, well, why not? They say, because I have to keep doing this. I have to keep earning this amount. And then we take some time, walk through everything, and I go, you really don't. You can make different choices
Hmm.
because you're not looking to keep growing your wealth over time to pass on.
Hmm.
If that end goal is different, the entire planning process needs to be different and needs to be recognized that it's okay to make that choice.
Hmm. Well, yeah, it's all about a question that I've dealt with in talking to various guests on the podcast. What is your number? And
Yep.
I think that that's really what you're talking about when you set out to answer that question. What is your number? How much? And for those folks who haven't really heard the question or thought about it, how much money do I need in retirement so that I don't outlive my money? And of
Yes.
course, determining what your number is has a lot to do with, you know, I guess traditional lifespan and your
Hmm.
family between you and your spouse and what you want to do in retirement. Do you
Hmm.
just want to take it easy and fish, or do you want to travel around the world, or what is it you want to do in retirement? And that kind of drives the uh, the bus on what your number is. And again, as you mentioned, uh, do you want to live? Do you want to have a legacy? And for a lot of people, that's not a goal.
Hmm.
Even couples with children, I've seen bumper stickers that'll say, "We're spending our children's inheritance."
Yes.
I'm like, good for you. You earned it.
Yeah.
You made it. You can spend it. So, yeah, a
Yes.
very different question in determining what your number is. Uh, Now, you've talked about the standard life script that traditional financial planning is built around. And
Hmm.
one of the biggest ways that that script fails childless couples, and where do they most often end up with a plan that just doesn't fit?
So many times we've had people come to us, and just recently had somebody come to me and say, we've had a planner, but we're looking to leave them because they have been incredibly rude and they don't necessarily believe that we don't want to have kids.
Hmm.
And it's this pressure that sometimes is put on people of you're going to change your mind, or are you sure? Like maybe you'll meet someone and then you'll change your mind and you'll decide to have kids. All of these different things that are put onto somebody. And we've got people who've come to us in their 20s and they go, I'm getting sterilized next week. Like they're not changing their mind.
Wow.
So, yeah. And it's just recognition that people are able of making their own choices. And also, planners need to recognize that just because the way you live your life is one way, doesn't mean that everybody else lives their life that exact same way. That standard life script is saying, okay, you're going to go to school, you're going to get married, you're going to buy a house, you're going to have kids, you're going to build that wealth up and then leave it behind when you die. Well, when you skip some of those steps on there, not having kids, potentially not buying a house. A lot of our child-free clients don't actually buy homes. They rent because they move around quite frequently to different areas. All of those things just take in a, hey, we need to have a flexible approach, not a once a year meeting and here's your 52-page plan.
Right.
Somebody recently asked me, what are your deliverables? And they were really used to that standard traditional model and wanting this big long plan. And I had to reiterate a few times. I'm not ever going to give you a 52-page plan that says, here you go, this is what to do. I'll see you next year. Because I already know that you're likely to come back to me and have lots of different changes you want to make along the way. And if I'm not meeting with you on a regular basis, I can't properly capture those. And that 52-page plan that I'd give you is outdated within a day or two most of the time
Mm-hmm.
because things change. So it's really the ability to be one, open to hearing what people have to say, be willing to plan for die with zero. There are some people who, some planners will say, we're not going to plan for a client to spend down their assets over time. Just not going to do it. And then also be willing to adjust and be flexible. Realize that things likely will change. I've had numerous clients who are going to move here or here or here or here or here. And it's funny to me because it's so normal for me that when somebody comes and says, nope, I'm staying here forever, we're not going to move, like we've got a good track, that almost in my mind, because of the work that I've been doing, is like, oh, wait, oh yeah, I guess you can stay in one place for years on end. And that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, so many of our clients don't do that. And that's not to, tends to be what I see a lot. And so it's just totally different planning.
Mm-hmm. And it goes to some extent in from what you're saying, it's an element in how you choose a financial planner, in
Hmm.
interviewing them. Are they going to be these rude people who are,
Yeah.
rigid in their thinking and this is how it is and this is what you're going to spend? And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're not going to have kids. We're not going to have those expenses. So that really comes into play. I did a podcast recently, and I'll leave a link in the show notes, but about the cost these days of raising a child,
Mm.
and the whole and that in the context of preparing for retirement as well, to say, look, you need to make certain decisions about your life as you're working and approaching retirement to make allowances for these expenses. And this is what you would have to contribute, and you're dealing with college as well as retirement.
Mm.
But so you sort of flipping the script on that, you're saying this is what it costs to raise a child. If you're not going to have children, this is the money you're not going to spend.
Yep.
So, and you can think of it very differently. Your path to retirement, saving for retirement, can be very different.
Mm.
And maybe your number is higher than it needs to be because
Yep.
you can contribute more because you don't have these other expenses, or you can enjoy that extra money now while you're working rather than waiting for retirement and having that extra money by having put
Yeah.
away a lot more. So there's really a balancing that goes on there, right?
There absolutely is. And figuring out, in the book Die with Zero, there's the concept of at different points in time of your life, you have different amounts of time,
Mm-hmm.
money, and health. We
Mm-hmm.
often talk about time, money, and freedom. But with that, it's really a balance of, okay, do you have more time right now? Or
Mm-hmm.
do you have more money or health or freedom? Anything like that? How can we take and adjust those levers to make sure that we're maximizing your life and allowing you to live your life fully? Part of the concept of child-free life by design is we want you to design an intentional life that fits what you want,
Mm-hmm.
not just going through the motions. And doing that requires that you recognize that you're going to have different aspects or different amounts of that time and health. It's a conversation that I often have with clients of, hey, I want to travel and I want to travel a lot for these amount of years. Once I get to these years, I don't think I'm really going to want to travel as much. Or I
Mm-hmm.
want to take, instead of doing all those international trips, I'm going to mainly focus on domestic trips.
Mm-hmm.
That is often one thing just because of the way that a lot of other countries are set up. They don't necessarily have some of the same like ADA laws and accessibility things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll see a lot of clients who their first few years after retirement or as they start winding down work, they're going to go international, do all those trips where they recognize, hey, maybe the roads are still cobblestone, probably can't get there if they were to have a walker or a wheelchair in the future, but they could probably do those things in the US
Mm-hmm.
because there's a little bit more flexibility and accessibility. Not always. We definitely have a long way to go, but it is slightly better at times here. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's recognizing and having that conversation, a conversation you wouldn't really think about that you'd have in financial planning of how can you actually travel to different places? But it's one that we take and factor into our plan of, okay, these years you're going to go international trips all year, spending a bunch of time abroad. And then these years you're going to come back, travel costs are going to go down, but just day-to-day living costs might go up a little bit because you might not have that one bedroom apartment that you just used before as kind of a home base while you were traveling. You might now be moving into something that's a little bit bigger, not too
Mm-hmm.
big, but still a little bit bigger to give you a little bit more space day to day.
Mm-hmm. Well, what you talk about, it sounds like um, a particular concept you have. In an episode quite a while ago, and I'll leave a link to the show notes, a couple that wrote a book about what they did with the fire movement, uh, financial independence, retire early. And that's what kind of what you described with a one bedroom apartment as the home base. And I mean, they retired in their 30s with a few $1 million that they had squirreled away. And then they used geographic arbitrage. They would live in different countries that had a much lower cost of living. So
Mhm.
they were able to save a lot of the money they would have ordinarily spent in the United States, or balance it out with staying in a country that had a much higher cost of living. So they had that variety. But what you've developed is a concept, and you kind of talked about it, financial independence, live early. So you're
Yes.
doing this traveling when you're younger, as you say. You don't need a wheelchair for the cobblestone streets or that sort of thing. And there have been authors that have talked about why wait till you're 65 or 67 to retire, do some little mini retirements every year and
Hmm.
enjoy that. Uh, so it sounds. Does that sound like what you're talking about? Am I getting that right?
You are. It is. So when we're
Okay.
talking about the two, we often will have clients come to us and they'll be heavy in the fire movement. They'll
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I want to hit financial independence and retire. And we ask them, well, what do you want to do upon retirement? Don't really have any answers. They're like, I just want to get out of this job. I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the conversation becomes, would you rather spend the next few years grinding it out at this job that you're really miserable at? Or would you rather take switch to a job that maybe you enjoy more? Not going to get necessarily paid as much, so you might have to work longer,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have that stress.
Mm-hmm.
And that really becomes a conversation of what do you value?
Mm-hmm.
For some people in the end, they want to stay on the fire path and stay in the job.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of people, they realize, oh, well, if I like what I'm doing, I could keep working longer. I don't have to take and just retire tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. And the conversation is really fun because sometimes when you have individuals and particularly in couples anyway, one person might really want to fire and the other person might want to file.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a conversation of, okay, well, can we meet in the middle somewhere? Can we take and say, hey, we're going to try this? Or are you okay if one person retires and the other person keeps working? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had a couples and I got somebody I'm thinking of, and he often says, I'm just going to be the house husband. Like, wife wants to keep working. He goes, I'll be the best house husband you've ever seen. And so that's okay. Like, for them, that's what works. And having that conversation and realizing that just because you want one thing doesn't necessarily mean that your partner wants it. I
Mm-hmm.
have a very strong opinion of I want to retire early. My wife loves her job and she's like, I'm going to go until the day that I'm forced into retirement. Okay, that's all right. So just having those conversations early and being aware of what the other one wants and really it goes back to that intentionality piece, being intentional with it.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing we'll ask is if you continue working past the point where you really need that money, what are you going to do with that money? We've had somebody who said, hey, I'm going to keep working. And they work at a bowling alley and they work for beer, bowling, and benefits. That's the whole point of their job. And it just brings them joy to do those things because they like all of them. So really finding out what matters to you and what do you want to do and how do you want to spend your time versus just grinding away at the job that you might not enjoy anymore.
Yeah, that's the real question of the fire movement. And again, I keep saying this, talked about it in other episodes where people think about the saving part and the investing part, and they may reach their number, but once you retire, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And you sit there, and a buddy of mine, he's afraid of retiring because the people he knows that retire end up just sitting around all day in their pajamas watching YouTube videos or something, binge
Yeah.
watching shows on Netflix. And it's like, I don't want that. I'm like, well, those are people that really didn't think through what they wanted to do. I'm
Mhm.
retiring at the end of April of next year, 27, and I've got a list of things that
Yeah.
I want to do, and so does my wife. So
Yeah.
we'll keep busy, but yeah, you really need to in making that determination between fire and file, and maybe work at a job that has maybe more gig work where you can
Mhm.
start and stop.
Yep.
And like I said, take little mini sabbaticals, or a buddy of mine's on a 30-day sabbatical from the company that he owns. He has
Mhm.
people that runs it for him, but and just sort of living early by being able to spend that money and having those sabbaticals. Uh,
And so many people, I want to just expand on the sabbatical thing. So many
yeah.
people believe that they cannot do a sabbatical
Mm-hmm.
or that they can't have a flexible work arrangement. Most of the time, if you do really good work and you go and talk to your boss about it, you're going to get what you want or
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get a version of it. But you have to be willing to ask. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have some people, medical professionals tend to be a great example who believe like, oh, I can't really do that. Yeah, you can. Well, let's cut your hours back And then you can work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or 2 weeks out of the month. Sometimes it'll back to back. So they'll work 4 weeks and then they'll take 4 weeks off. Trying those different things, cutting back your other hours too, if even if you're in a regular corporate job, of what flexibility is there. But
Mhm.
if you don't ask, the always answer is always going to be no. So
Mhm.
having the plan and having just the ask is a great thing for people to start out with.
Mhm. So then I guess the next question is, with no children to plan around,
Mhm.
childless couples often have more financial flexibility than they realize. How should they be redirecting that flexibility? What does an optimized savings and investment strategy look like for them?
Yeah. One of the things that we do in our process is we say save and invest towards your goals.
Mhm.
So we really want to know, what are your goals? We have a lot of conversations about life. I've
Mhm.
had people come to me before and they say, uh, a number of them that I can think of, they'll come and say, I don't want to talk about life. I only want to talk about numbers.
Mhm.
And I go, okay, I hear you. In order for me to have a good conversation about your numbers, I
Mhm.
really need to understand what you want your life to look like first.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, I can give you plans for these numbers, but they're not going to match what actually the life that you're trying to live or what you want.
Mhm.
And so we're missing the entire point there. So the conversation is always, how do you want to spend your time? You've got your whole list of things in retirement that you want to do. Okay. Is there anything on that list that might require a higher savings rate for a period of time? Dr. J, our founder, often talks about he loves boating. That is his big thing. He wants to retire and live on a boat and then go around the world and then just kind of keep writing and doing things for fun like that.
Mhm.
That's going to require a larger amount of money than your day-to-day life would.
Mhm.
And so it's, do we need to take and intentionally save more to hit that goal?
Mhm.
Or are you going to go and live abroad like some of the couples you talked about of, hey, maybe the cost of the living is lower. Okay. Well, then it might not necessarily be that we're saving for living expenses, but you might need to pay for residency in other countries to go there, depending on how long you want to go and where you want to go.
Mhm.
Some people we've seen pay for citizenship. The Golden Visa has been a really popular thing. And it's figuring out, what does that life look like? And then what are those expenses attached to it that we need to plan for? Because that's your goal. It's not just, hey, we're going to keep living our life and our expenses are going to continually stay about the same all the time. Nope, we need to add these different things in and make it fun and exciting for you.
Mhm. So that the next question often becomes, I mean, you may not care about legacy because you don't have children, but you're still going to have stuff.
Yep.
And if you bought a house, if you haven't outlived your money, if you're gonna have that stuff. And what do you do with that stuff?
Mhm.
So that comes to the issue that my wife and I are looking at too, and a lot of childless couples have to look at some point. You know, Traditional estate planning, or really estate planning in general, centers on who gets what.
Yep.
But so who's getting what if you don't have children? So I understand you focus on a deeper layer, what you call care plans.
Mhm.
So what is a care plan, and why is it especially critical for someone without kids?
Care plans are really going to focus on that next level layer. You've got your estate planning documents. They say who's going to make all those decisions for you. And then with care plans, we go deeper and we say, okay, well, expand upon the decisions.
Mhm.
We have a child-free trust system, and within the child-free trust, the first part of it is all the legal documents. You can get all your legal documents done. Child-free trust with the partner trust company can serve as that professional fiduciary in all the roles, including medical power of attorney. Great. But there's also still a life to be run. Think about if you're stepping into somebody's life and you're serving all these roles. Well, now we need to figure out, where is their money located actually? Is their house? Do they have a pet that needs to be taken care of? How do they need to be taken care of? Many people will go and prepay for either funeral plans or burial plots. It's been a numerous thing that if you don't have that conversation, people aren't going to bring it up. So with care plans, we each strive to take and organize all of that information into one central location
Mhm.
so that when something happens, you can easily find it. I've worked with a number of clients who have either lost their spouse or their spouse is experiencing cognitive decline, and they were the person that really handled everything. Well, that was great when they were alive. But now that person is gone or just doesn't have the capability to share where things are. And we're working through trying to find things. There's a number of people I can think of who we've worked with for years now, and we're still uncovering different things. We're finding, oh, there's money here. Or, oh, there's this a bucket of silver coins in the closet. Or, oh, this item exists here, but we can't necessarily find everything, and it takes a long time to sort through it. So the care plans are the whole idea of organizing everything into a central location. And while it might not physically be there, at least giving direction to where these things are found, because we want to make it as easy as possible. We often talk about in couples, it's really kind of mean to your partner to not have a conversation with them and be open with them and
Mm,
share where things are. If you're a soloist and you're doing this on your own, you still want things to be organized because if somebody steps in and needs to fill in any of those estate planning roles for you,
mm,
you want them to know where things are at. I
mm,
think we can all probably think of somebody that we know who has had to fill in and step into the role for a parent and then do the whole house clean out after they've passed.
mm,
And how sometimes that can just go on for years, going through
mm,
and organizing things and finding things. Had a great conversation this weekend with a family member, and here more things have been found years after passing.
mm,
And so it's how can things be organized as clean and clear as possible to make it easier for the next person.
mm,
We often talk about Swedish death cleaning too, of we'll have our clients, we'll either recommend the book to them or the minimalism game, which is whatever day of the calendar it is. So like we're recording this on the 18th. Today, the goal would be to give away 18 things or get rid of 18 things.
mm,
Going through and how can you pare down your belongings to
mm,
really only have what matters to you and then makes things simple for the person who might need to take care of things when you're gone.
mm. Well, that's clearly, I mean, if you don't have kids, you're really relying on um, a cousin or something like that. I mean, you're really, nothing's flowing down a generation. And by the time you go, your parents, aunts, uncles, things like that might be gone as well. So the likelihood that you will need a friend to come in and take care of all of this, that's a lot of work unless you pre-plan. But you say if you have pre-planned funerals,
Mhm.
and you say, okay, this is the information on it, this is where you can find it. When I go, just pull that folder, contact the funeral home, and you're off to the races. That can
Yeah.
be very helpful. My father-in-law did that when my mother-in-law passed. She went from cancer, and uh, they pre-planned the funeral. So when she passed, we just contacted the funeral home and said it's a go, and
Yeah.
proceeded on. So anything you can do to help this person who's going to be the executor of your estate or the trustee of your trust or whatever it
Mhm.
is, where is everything? Where can they find it? How can they, if it's paperless and on a computer, what are the passwords? How do they get into it?
Yep.
So these are a lot of things they need to look at in their estate planning to just make it easier to administer. Uh, but also, there are a lot of, if it matters to them, tax consequences. You're not, depending upon the state you live in, there may be an estate tax, depending on the size
Hmm.
of your estate. But there are also, a lot of states have inheritance tax. So if you're not,
Yep.
if you're giving and your stuff goes to non-family members, there's going to be tax to pay. So,
Yes.
would you recommend certain tax planning if that's something that's important to uh, the person?
Yeah. It's a good conversation to have and go through and think about. One of the big things, actually, more than giving it away to other people,
Mm-hmm.
is giving it away to unmarried partners
Mm-hmm.
because people often don't think about, oh, this person, we've been together for how many decades at this point, but we're not married. Well, if you're not married and you pass and your intention is that expenses, your money and all those things, well, you've been looking at them as a joint duo for the number of years, there could be taxes on it. And you have to plan for that and consider that when you're doing your financial plan,
Mm-hmm.
thinking through how does that impact us? And sometimes does it make sense to get married? Does it not make sense to get married? From both not only inheritance and estate taxes, but also just throughout life too.
Hmm.
And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends, especially now with the updated tax laws and the SALT caps and just the way they're written. If you're high income earners, it might not make sense to get married right now. But it is a good conversation to have of what do the taxes look like and what do we need to be prepared for?
Hmm. Well, there are pros and cons. I mean, it might not make
Mhm.
sense to get married now, but if you want your stuff to go to your partner and you're not married, then you're going to care a lot about what the taxes
Yeah.
are.
Yep.
Because they can be rather high, and now, especially if there are a lot of non-liquid assets, if the main asset
Mhm.
is your home, you don't want that partner to have to sell the home just to pay the inheritance tax.
Yeah. Be bad.
So, really talking to an experienced estate planning attorney on how to address that becomes very important.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, uh, and then they may not die, but they may become infirm. They may end up having to be in a memory unit, or and
Mhm.
you're either uh, the non-disabled spouse has been the caretaker, or they predecease. Now what happens?
Yeah.
How do you care for that person who's still alive? And often if you have kids, you that child is often the person that makes all the decisions, like my wife with her father. That
Mhm.
happens. But how do childless couples deal with that? I mean, you don't have kids, and they won't be there to take care of you. So how do they? How? What are your ideas on how they address that?
That really comes into the care plans too, of having that conversation and being prepared for things.
Mm-hmm.
So within the care plans, you can further expand, and we often ask people to do so, of what do you want long-term care to look like? We talk with our clients and ask that by about their mid 40s. Are we
Mm-hmm.
going to self-fund long-term care? Are we going to get long-term care insurance? Or for some people, it's just not feasible to self-fund or get long-term care insurance. That's where Medicaid is kind of with the fallback option there. Um, we don't know for certain that it's going to be around like in the future. There's been cuts to it, but for some people who might not have the financial resources to self-fund, and then others who might not qualify for long-term care insurance and also don't have the resources to self-fund, that is a fallback there. But
Yeah.
at least having that conversation, being prepared, because you don't want to have to make that decision in a moment of crisis. Had a number of clients who something has gone awry with their parent, and now they're suddenly making all those decisions and finding out that mom and dad didn't plan properly for long-term care. So that is a huge driver of one of the questions of long-term care. I almost find that I don't necessarily have to bring it up with couples
Mm-hmm.
or any sort of child-free individual because a lot of them bring it up on their own right away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, if they wouldn't bring it up, I would still bring it up. It's one of the things that we check on initially. But a lot of them are aware that they need to make a plan, and that's a high point of anxiety for them.
Mm-hmm.
So we encourage people to look at the different options and look for funding. Also, go look at specific facilities. Where might you want to stay and live if you needed to go into that? Would you want to stay at home and age in place for many years and then go into full skilled nursing? Would you want to look at something like a CCRC, continuing care retirement community?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be more of your style of, hey, you start out, you're independent living, you just essentially have a little house or an apartment there. And then as you need more care, you can go into different levels that have more care for you over time.
Right.
But being aware of that and also saying where that might be, whether it's a specific facility. In rural areas, it's really important that you have this almost even more than a city because cities tend to have more options.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota, and there I can tell you that the conversation often that I hear of family members is if they need care, they're going to have to go 50, 60, 100 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And where is that going to be? Because they're not really going to know anybody in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
So what we find is a lot of them tend to group together and go, okay, we're all going to go to this town because then we can kind of be together. So having that conversation and looking for facilities that might be of interest to you and just being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're prepared doesn't necessarily mean it has to be you're going to go in there the next day or anything like that. But I do find that with estate planning, sometimes people get worried of if I create my estate plan, then I'm going to die within the next few days. No, you're not. It's just you're prepared.
Right.
And you've got something laid out. So that way, the person who is stepping in to make decisions for you knows what decisions that you would want made. Because you and I could have very different ideas of how we might want life to look like.
Mhm.
And if we were to step in for one another, well, hey, we don't necessarily know what the other one would want. Even your sibling, if you've got them listed, they might have a different belief than you. And so the way they lay things out might not match the choices that you would actually make for yourself. So
Mhm.
having as much of it written down, documented, and just having the conversations early and often is incredibly important.
And it's not just the planning, like I said, a financial end. Do you self-fund? Do you get
Yeah.
long-term care insurance? But there has to be a human being that actually carries
Mhm.
that out, and you don't have children that can do
Yep.
that. So a big step here is choosing the right person.
Hmm.
Who is that friend who's going to be there? Can you rely on them? Are they living near enough to you to be able to carry all of this out? Are they comfortable with it? And then making sure, just like everything else, here's where the long-term insurance documents are. Here's
Yep.
how to access funds in our accounts to self-pay if that's the path, so that they know what they're doing.
Yeah. We specifically set that up within the child-free trust system to ask all those questions because
Mm-hmm.
we want all that information of where is it? Even spouses, like I said earlier, if they don't have those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
there's a trend that's been going around where you record your spouse and ask them if they know how to pay the mortgage. And it's meant to be funny, but it's irritates me to no end because I don't find it funny if your
Yeah,
spouse doesn't know how to pay bills. That
right.
leaves them in a really bad position if something ever happens to you. And I find that to be incredibly mean to them.
Well,
Like,
my wife and I have this conversation quite a bit. It's like she'll have a problem with it. I said, "Well, what would you do if I wasn't here?"
yeah.
And not to criticize her at all, but it's sort of that sort of surfaced the problem, and then we talk about it. We
Yep.
have a shared password vault. She has
Hmm.
the passwords to all of my accounts, and I have, where they're separate, and and I have access to hers, so that if we need to get in, we can do it. Where
Yep.
are the documents that we need? Where can we find them? If something happens to one of us, a very important
Exactly.
conversation. So,
It is.
just to wrap this up, so that our listeners have uh, a launch point to going forward, what's the first thing a childless couple should do if they suspect that their current financial plan was built for someone else's life script, like that financial planner who insisted, "Oh, you'll have kids," and set it up that way, but they suspect that maybe that's a really wrong path for a childless couple.
Yeah. First thing is ask. If you're working with a financial planner, ask them how your financial plan changes because you don't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
If they say that it doesn't or that you'll change your mind,
Mm-hmm.
those are not great answers.
Mm-hmm.
If they say, I don't know, okay, they might be willing to learn. So it's not a complete, oh no, run. It's a, all right, well, let's make sure that you learn,
Mm-hmm.
but at least they're willing to admit that
Mm-hmm.
because we've ran into people before who many answers have been the it won't or you'll change your mind. And so I would rather see the I don't know
Mm-hmm.
and then be willing to dive in deeper
Mm-hmm.
than anything else. Start there. If those answers can't be answered or they refuse to answer them, which might be another thing, you need to go look for somebody else. Look for somebody who understands what it means to work with child-free people and also understands what it means when you say, "Hey, I don't want to leave money behind."
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about that, we often say we encourage people to look for a flat fee planner.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that charging a percentage when it comes to die with zero can potentially create some subconscious bias, maybe conscious bias too,
Mm-hmm.
of not wanting to encourage people to spend down their assets over time
Mm-hmm.
because the paycheck is directly tied to that percentage. Whereas a flat fee, it doesn't matter how much you spend, there's not going to be a change there. So there's no maybe internal motivation from the advisor to say, oh, nope, don't spend money. You need to keep saving this. So having those conversations and just asking the question to start is where I would begin.
And looking for the answers, that's the perfect segue to the next thing which
Mhm.
is that if they find themselves hitting a wall and they
Yep.
have a financial planner who says, "I don't know," says you'll change your mind, or where clearly they're not getting through and not getting the answers they need for this sort of thing, how can they get in touch with you
Yeah.
to for you to help them? Because obviously you have a lot of answers that may help them. So tell me about how you help folks, what your fee structures are, how they can reach out to you. Talk about that.
Yeah. So the best way to find us and all the things that we do is going to be going to childfreeinsights.com. That is our head parent company. You
Mm-hmm.
can find all of our resources there, our podcast, blog articles that we have. And then you can also find our two different companies, Child Free Wealth and Child Free Trust. On
Mm-hmm.
Child Free Wealth, that is where you can meet with a certified financial planner. Might be myself, might be a couple of our other team members, and really begin having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We start with what we call the Child Free Wealth Checkup. It's an hour-long consultation. As of recording, we charge $250 for it. And before the meeting, what we do is we send you a couple of forms and we ask you to provide all your financial information, but also provide a lot of information regarding your life. We go through, we review it, we look at it, and then we have the conversation with you. Afterwards, you get a report. And on the report, we mark, hey, this is going good. This is okay. This is going to need some work, or we need more information in these different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's really the launch point for if you want to do ongoing planning.
Mm-hmm.
With ongoing planning, we have a couple different options. We have our Child Free Wealth 180, which is quarterly meetings. And that is where if you're looking for more advice only and you know you need some help, but you don't necessarily need super in-depth help, then the quarterly meetings are great. Child Free Wealth 360, that is a lot more hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where if you want us to manage your investments, we do. We charge flat fee for everything. So Child Free Wealth 180 is $5,000 for the year, and then Child Free Wealth 360 is $10,000 for the year. But with 360, you can meet monthly if you want. We have a lot of clients who will meet monthly for the first year, and then after that, they're going to go off living their life. I've got a couple clients just had an email in my inbox this morning saying, "Hey, thanks for all of our meetings. Like, I'm on a trip. Here's some pictures from the trip I'm taking. I'll see you again next month." Haven't met with this client for a few months now just because they're living their life and doing all the things that we worked so hard to get them to do. And I know that we'll meet up, and the next time we meet, it'll probably be a couple hours. We have a conversation and go through and see what that trip sparked for them and how they need to adjust. But 360 is going to be more of that hands-on. We can kind of do those things and have a little bit more time
Mm-hmm.
to go through and make some of those changes for individuals. But starting out, Child Free Insights, you can get to the Child Free Wealth website from there and the Child Free Trust website where we do all the estate planning and serve in all those estate planning roles for individuals as well.
Right. Well, I certainly informative. And sort of gives us the questions we need to ask ourselves in looking at this, and questions not only to ask ourselves, but to ask our financial planner and to make sure we're getting the right advice and going in the right direction. So thanks for coming on the show, Bree, and helping us all out, those couples out there that don't have kids and are wondering what to do.
Thank you for having me today.
Bye bye.